Jake Martinez sat in the passenger section of the transport ship New Horizon, watching the stars through the small window. He was on his way back to Earth after a 3-month leave visiting his sister on Mars Colony. The big man wore simple civilian clothes, but his alert eyes and straight posture showed his military training. Few people on the ship knew he was a Navy SEAL. The ship carried about 200 passengers, mostly families and workers traveling between colonies. Jake had noticed Lisa Carter, a young engineer, traveling with her 8-year-old daughter Amy. The little girl had been asking him questions about space travel for the past 2 days. Her mother seemed tired, but grateful that someone was keeping Amy busy. "Mr. Jake, do you think we'll see any aliens on this trip?" Amy asked, bouncing in her seat next to him. Jake smiled at the girl. "I don't think so, kiddo. Most alien species stay in their own space. We're pretty safe out here." He was wrong. The attack came without warning. One moment the ship was cruising peacefully through space, and the next moment red lights were flashing everywhere. The captain's voice came over the speakers, tight with fear. "All passengers, this is Captain Brooks. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Please remain calm and stay in your seats." Through the window, Jake saw 3 large black ships closing in fast. They looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The ships had sharp edges and strange symbols painted on their hulls. Bright energy. Beams shot from the alien vessels, hitting the New Horizon shields. The transport ship shook hard. People screamed as they were thrown from their seats. Emergency lights came on as the main power failed. Jake grabbed Amy and pulled her close to protect her from flying debris. "Mom!" Amy cried out. Lisa crawled over to them, blood running from a cut on her forehead. "Amy, baby, are you okay?" "She's fine," Jake said, checking the girl for injuries. "But we need to get to the emergency stations." Another hit rocked the ship. This time, Jake heard the sound of metal tearing. The aliens were cutting through the hull. He knew the New Horizon was a civilian ship with no real weapons. They were sitting ducks. "Listen to me," Jake told Lisa quietly. "When those aliens board this ship, you take Amy and hide. Find the maintenance tunnels near the engine room. Stay there no matter what happens." "What about you?" Lisa asked. "I'm going to buy you time," Jake said. His ship's hull exploded inward near the front section. Through the hole came creatures that made Jake's blood run cold. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with gray skin and muscles like steel cables. They wore black armor and carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. Their faces looked almost human, but their eyes were yellow and cold. The aliens moved through the ship like professional soldiers. They stunned anyone who tried to fight and gathered the passengers in groups. Jake counted at least 20 of the creatures. They worked together smoothly, like they had done this many times before. One of the aliens, bigger than the others, seemed to be in charge. He had red markings on his armor and a scar across his left cheek. When he spoke, his voice was deep and harsh. "Humans of this vessel," the alien leader announced. "I am Captain Zethkar of the Corvin Empire. Your ship is now our prize. You will come with us. Those who fight will die. Those who cooperate will live." Jake helped Lisa and Amy move toward the back of the ship while the aliens were busy with other passengers. But as they reached the maintenance area, one of the Corvin soldiers spotted them. "Stop!" the alien shouted, raising his weapon. Jake pushed Lisa and Amy behind a metal support beam and stepped forward. "They're just civilians," he said. "They don't need to be part of this." The Corvin soldier looked at Jake with interest. Unlike the other passengers, this human didn't seem afraid. He stood straight and calm, ready to fight even without weapons. "You are different," the soldier said. "You have the look of a warrior." "Let them go," Jake said again. The soldier smiled, showing sharp teeth. "I think not." Jake moved fast. He grabbed a heavy metal pipe from the damaged wall and swung it at the alien's weapon. The energy gun flew from the creature's hands. Before the Corvin could react, Jake hit him in the stomach with the pipe. The alien doubled over, but didn't fall. These creatures were tough. The Corvin grabbed Jake's arm and threw him across the corridor. Jake hit the wall hard, but rolled, and came up fighting. More Corvin soldiers arrived, drawn by the noise. Jake fought them with everything he had learned in SEAL training. He used the ship's narrow corridors to his advantage, making it hard for the aliens to surround him. He grabbed their weapons when he could and used the ship's structure as cover. For 10 minutes, Jake held them off. He disabled 3 soldiers and kept the others from reaching Lisa and Amy's hiding spot. But more aliens kept coming. Finally, one of them hit him with a stun weapon from behind. Jake felt electricity course through his body. His muscles locked up, and he fell to the floor, unable to move. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Captain Zethkar, standing over him. "This one is special," the captain said to his soldiers. "Look how he fights. Look how he protects the weak ones. He will make an excellent gladiator." One of the soldiers picked up Jake's military identification tags from around his neck. The metal tags had his name, rank, and unit information stamped into them. But the alien couldn't read the human writing. To him, they looked like simple decoration. "Should we remove these trinkets?" the soldier asked. "Leave them," Captain Zethkar said. "The humans seem to value such things. Let him keep his primitive jewelry." The Corvin captain had no idea he was looking at the identification of one of Earth's most elite warriors. The tags clearly marked Jake as a Navy SEAL, but to the aliens, they were just meaningless metal pieces as Jake was carried unconscious to the alien ships. Lisa and Amy watched from their hiding place. The little girl cried quietly as her new friend was taken away. She didn't understand why the nice man had risked his life for them. The Corvin loaded their prisoners onto their ships and set course for their homeworld. They had captured another group of humans for their gladiator games. They thought they understood what humans could do in battle. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Jake woke up on a cold stone floor. His head pounded and his body ached from the stun weapon. He tried to sit up slowly, blinking in the dim light. He was in a small cell with metal bars on one side. The walls were made of dark stone, and the air smelled of sweat and fear. Other cells lined both sides of a long corridor. Jake could hear movement and voices speaking in different languages. Some sounded human, but most were alien tongues he didn't recognize. Through the bars, he saw creatures of various shapes and sizes in the other cells. "You're awake," said a voice nearby. Jake turned to see a man in the cell next to his. He looked human but had pale blue skin and silver hair. "I am Beltar. I was once a soldier for the Corvin Empire until I questioned the wrong orders." "Jake Martinez," Jake replied, getting to his feet. "Where are we?" "The gladiator pits beneath the great arena on Thaktar," Veltar explained. "The Corvin homeworld. You will fight here for their entertainment, or you will die." Jake looked around at the other prisoners. In another cell, he saw a small creature about 3 feet tall with green skin and large eyes. The little being waved at him with a friendly smile. "That's Nix," Veltar said. "He's from the Zephyrian Collective. Used to be a traitor until the Corvin captured his ship. He's smarter than he looks." "How long have you been here?" Jake asked. 6 months, Veltar said sadly. "I've won 12 fights. Each victory earns better food and a slightly larger cell. But freedom? That's just a story they tell to keep us fighting." Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. A massive Corvin warrior, approached, even bigger than Captain Zethkar. This one had scars covering his arms, and a metal plate where his left eye should be. Behind him walked two smaller Corvin guards. "New meat," the big alien said, stopping at Jake's cell. "I am War Chief Grokthul, master of this arena. You will fight tomorrow. If you win, you eat. If you lose, you feed the sand. What if I refuse?" "To fight?" Jake asked. Grokthul laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Then you starve until you change your mind. But first, we hurt the other humans we captured. Your choice, warrior." Jake's hands clenched into fists. They had Lisa and Amy somewhere in this place. He couldn't let them suffer because of his choices. "I'll fight," Jake said. "Good," Grokthul said. "Your opponent tomorrow is a bone crusher from Pyros. They are 10 feet tall and have skin like rock. Most fighters die in the first minute." The war chief walked away, laughing. Veltar shook his head. "A bone crusher for your first fight? They really want you dead quickly. Tell me about this place," Jake said. "How does the arena work?" Nix spoke up from his cell, his voice high but clear. "The arena is old, maybe 1,000 years. It's built into a natural crater. The fighting floor is sand over solid rock. There are weapons hung on the walls, but most are damaged or dull. The Corvin want to see skill, not easy kills. The crowds love blood," Veltar added, "but they respect clever fighting more than brute force. If you can surprise them, you might live longer." Jake spent the rest of the day learning about his fellow prisoners. There were warriors from a dozen different worlds, all captured in Corvin raids. Some had been fighting for years. Others, like a reptilian creature called Sark, had only arrived weeks ago. The guards brought food once, a bowl of thick, gray liquid that tasted terrible but filled the stomach. Jake noticed that Veltar and some of the other long-term prisoners got slightly better portions. Everything here was about earning your place through combat. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He thought about Lisa and Amy, hoping they were safe somewhere in this alien city. He thought about his team back on Earth, wondering if anyone knew what had happened to the New Horizon. He touched his dog tags through his shirt, the familiar metal giving him some comfort. The next morning came too soon. Guards opened Jake's cell and led him through a maze of corridors. Other prisoners watched him go, some with pity, others with curiosity. Jake tried to memorize the route, looking for exits or weak points in the prison security. They brought him to a staging area beneath the arena floor. He could hear the roar of a crowd above his head. Thousands of Corvin voices chanted for blood and death. The sound was overwhelming. "Your weapons," a guard said, pointing to a rack of old swords, spears, and clubs. Most looked like they had seen better days. Jake picked up a short sword that seemed balanced and a small shield with dents in it. "You have one chance," the guard said. "Fight well and live. Fight poorly and die." A huge door began to open, letting in bright sunlight and a deafening noise of the crowd. Jake stepped out onto the sandy arena floor. The space was enormous, maybe 200 feet across, surrounded by high stone walls. Above the walls, thousands of Corvin spectators filled seats that rose up like a mountain. Across the arena, another door opened. What came out made Jake's mouth go dry-dot. The bone crusher was exactly what its name suggested. 10 feet tall and covered in thick gray hide that looked like stone. Its arms were as thick as tree trunks, and its hands ended in claws that could tear a man in half. Yellow eyes focused on Jake with primitive hunger. The crowd went wild as the creature roared and beat its chest. Dust fell from the arena walls from the force of its voice. "Fight!" War Chief Grokthul's voice boomed from somewhere above. The bone crusher charged straight at Jake. moving faster than something that size should be able to move. Jake rolled to the side, barely avoiding claws that left deep scratches in the sand. Where he had been standing, the creature was strong and fast, but Jake noticed something important. It fought with pure instinct, no strategy or planning. It was like fighting a very dangerous animal. Jake circled around the beast, staying out of reach of its massive arms. The crowd booed, wanting to see blood, not dancing. But Jake ignored them. He was studying his opponent, looking for weaknesses. The bone crusher had thick hide everywhere except around its eyes and the joints of its arms and legs. Its movements were powerful, but not precise, and it was already breathing hard from its charge. Jake feinted left, then rolled right as the creature swung at him. He slashed with his sword across the back of its knee joint. The blade bit deep, and the creature roared in pain and anger. Now Jake had its attention. The bone crusher turned and charged again. But this time Jake was ready. He ran straight at it, confusing the creature. At the last second, he slid between its legs and slashed at the other knee. The crowd grew quieter, watching this strange human who fought with his brain instead of just his muscles. Not Jake continued. His strategy, staying mobile, making small cuts, wearing the creature down. The bone crusher grew more frustrated and sloppy with each missed attack. Finally, Jake saw his chance. The creature overextended on a wild swing, leaving its neck exposed. Jake jumped up, using a broken pillar for height, and drove his sword deep into the soft spot behind the creature's jaw. The bone crusher crashed to the ground, dead. The arena fell silent for a moment. Then the crowd exploded in surprise and approval. They had never seen a human fight like this before. Jake stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard but alive. He looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at him. For the first time since his capture, he felt hope. If he could surprise them once, maybe he could do it again. Jake's victory over the bone crusher changed everything in the gladiator pits. When he returned to his cell, the other prisoners looked at him with new respect. Even the guards seemed different, more careful around him. That was incredible. Nick said, his large eyes bright with excitement. I've seen 50 fighters face bone crushers. You're the first to win without getting hurt. Veltar nodded slowly. The way you fought, using your mind instead of just strength. It reminded me of the old stories my grandfather told about legendary warriors. Jake sat down on his small sleeping mat. His body was tired, but his mind was racing. How often do we fight? Depends on how popular you become, Veltar explained. Winners fight more often. The crowd loves champions. Over the next few weeks, Jake fought 6 more times. Each opponent was different and dangerous. There was a spider-like creature from the ice world of Krell that could climb walls and shoot poison. Jake defeated it by causing part of the arena ceiling to collapse, trapping the creature under heavy stones. Then came the fire wolves, 3 pack hunters that worked together like a deadly team. Jake noticed they always attacked from 3 directions, so he positioned himself near the arena wall and used his shield to block their fire breath while striking with his sword. His most difficult fight was against another gladiator, a warrior named Orcs from the Stellar Federation. Orcs was skilled with weapons and had been fighting in the arena for 2 years. But Jake's military training gave him an edge. He used techniques the alien had never seen before, combining moves from different fighting styles. Each victory made Jake more famous across the Corvin Empire. People in the cities talked about the strange human who fought like no one they had ever seen. Merchants sold small statues of Jake in the markets. Children drew pictures of his battles on walls. Jake wasn't fighting for fame. Every night, he planned. He studied the guards' routines. He counted the number of soldiers who worked in the prison. He memorized every corridor and door he had seen. "You're planning something," Beltar said one evening after Jake's 7th. "Victory. I can see it in your eyes." Jake looked around to make sure no guards were listening. "I'm not leaving here alone," he said quietly. "There are other humans somewhere in this place. I need to find them." "The work camps," Nix whispered. "I heard guards talking. They have humans digging in the mines outside the city. Hard work. Little food." Jake's heart clenched. Lisa and Amy were probably there, suffering while he fought for entertainment. He had to find a way to help them. "It's impossible," Beltar said sadly. "Even if you could escape the arena, the work camps are heavily guarded. And then what? How do you get off this planet?" "One step at a time," Jake said. "First, I need to learn more about this place." Jake began talking to every prisoner he could. He learned that the arena was just one part of a huge complex. There were training areas, weapon storage rooms, and administrative offices above ground. Below, there were holding areas for different types of prisoners. A reptilian fighter named Sark told him about the guard shifts. They change every 8 hours. For 10 minutes during the change, the main corridor is only watched by cameras. A bird-like creature called Zach knew about the ventilation system. The air shafts connect all levels. Too small for most of us, but maybe a human could fit. Jake started bringing his fellow gladiators together, not just for information, but for something more important. In the Corvin culture, warriors fought alone for personal glory. But Jake showed them something different. "Back home, we have a saying," Jake told a group of prisoners one night. "No one gets left behind. We succeed together, or we fail together." This idea was strange to most of them. Veltar had been a soldier, but even Corvin military units focused on individual achievement. The concept of team loyalty was new. Jake demonstrated what he meant during training sessions. When guards allowed prisoners to practice together, Jake taught them to work as a unit. He showed Nix how to distract opponents, while Sark attacked from behind. He taught Veltar how to coordinate with others instead of fighting alone. "Why do you care about us?" asked Zach. "You could probably escape by yourself. You're famous now. They give you better food and treatment." "Because it's right," Jake said simply. "And because alone, we're just prisoners waiting to die. Together, we might actually have a chance." Word of Jake's growing influence reached the upper levels of the arena. War Chief Grok Thul watched training sessions with growing concern. This human was changing how the other prisoners behaved. They were starting to act like a military unit instead of individual fighters. "He's dangerous," Grok Thul told his assistant. "Not because he wins fights, but because he makes the others think differently. Should we separate him from the others?" The assistant asked. "No," Grok Thul said after thinking. "That would make him a martyr. Instead, we give him harder opponents. If he dies in the arena, the others will remember that cooperation doesn't stop death." Meanwhile, far above the gladiator pits, in the command center of the Corvin military, General Vac-Thorn was studying reports about the human fighter. Something about this Jake Martinez bothered him. "Get me everything we know about human military structure," he ordered his intelligence officer, Tekanal. "Sir, we already studied humans during the border conflicts," Tekanal replied. "They're not particularly impressive. Good at using tools, but their individual warriors are weak." "Then explain this," General Vac-Thorn said, showing him video footage of Jake's fights. "This human defeats opponents that should kill him easily. And look at how he moves, how he thinks. This isn't luck." Tekanal watched the recordings with growing interest. The human's tactics were unlike anything in their database of human combat techniques. "Perhaps he's some kind of specialist?" "Find out," the general ordered. "I want to know exactly what kind of human we're dealing with." Back in the gladiator pits, Jake continued his careful planning. He had mapped out most of the underground levels and identified the weakest points in the security system. More importantly, he had built a network of allies among the prisoners. Veltar had become his second in command, helping to organize the others. Nix used his small size to scout areas the guards couldn't see him exploring. Even the newest prisoners were learning to work together instead of just surviving alone. "When do we move?" Veltar asked one night after Jake's 10th victory. "Soon," Jake said, touching his dog tags through his shirt. "But first, I need to find out exactly where they're keeping the other humans. We can't leave anyone behind." What Jake didn't know was that his dog tags, hanging around his neck in plain sight, contained all the information General Vac Thorn was looking for. The metal tags clearly identified him as a member of the United States Navy SEALs, one of Earth's most elite fighting forces. But to the Corvin, the tags were just meaningless decorations. They had no idea they were looking at the identification of a warrior trained in the most advanced military techniques Earth had to offer. That ignorance was about to cost them dearly. As Jake prepared for his next fight, he felt confident for the first time since his capture. He had allies, he had a plan, and most importantly, he had hope. The Corvin thought they understood human warriors. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The grand tournament came without warning. Jake woke up to find guards opening every cell in the gladiator section. War Chief Grok Thul stood in the corridor with a cruel smile on his scarred face. "Today is special," Grok Thul announced. "The Emperor himself will watch the fights. We have prepared something new for his entertainment." Jake and the other prisoners were led to the staging area beneath the arena. Instead of the usual single combat preparation, they found themselves grouped. Together, 20 gladiators from different worlds stood in the large holding room. "What's happening?" Nix whispered to Jake. Before Jake could answer, Grokthul's voice boomed through the speakers. "Today, you will all fight together. 20 gladiators against the Crimson Pack. 12 Vorthak hunting beasts from the death world of Nexus Prime. Veltar's face went pale. Vorthix hunt in coordinated groups. They're smart, fast, and their claws can cut through steel. No gladiator has ever survived fighting more than 3 at once." Jake looked around at his fellow prisoners. Some were terrified. Others seemed resigned to death. A few, like Sark and Zak, looked angry but ready to fight. "Listen to me," Jake said quietly, gathering the group around him. "We can win this, but only if we work together exactly like we practiced." 12 Vorthix? Said a new prisoner, a large humanoid called Brock. "You're crazy, human." "Maybe," Jake said. "But I'd rather die fighting smart than die fighting stupid." The arena doors opened, and the gladiators walked out into the bright sunlight. The crowd was larger than Jake had ever seen. Thousands of Corvin filled every seat, and in the imperial box, a massive figure in golden armor sat on a throne. Emperor Korthval himself had come to watch. Across the arena, 12 metal cages sat in a line. Inside each cage, Jake could see the shadowy forms of the Vorthix. They were roughly human-sized, but moved like liquid darkness. Their red eyes glowed in the shadows, and their claws scraped against the metal bars. "Form up like we practiced," Jake called out to his team. "Nix, you're our scout. Stay mobile and call out their movements. Veltar, Sark, you're with me in the center. Everyone else, remember your positions." The crowd grew quiet as the cages began to open. The Vorthix emerged slowly, testing the air with their senses. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, with sleek black fur and muscles that moved like coiled springs. The pack leader, larger than the others, let out a howling cry. The sound chilled Jake's blood, but he held his position. The 12 Creatures spread out, just like he expected. They were going to try to surround the gladiators. Now, Jake shouted dot instead of waiting to be surrounded. The gladiators moved as one unit. Jake had taught them to attack the enemy's formation before the enemy could use their numbers. The prisoners charged forward in a tight wedge, with Jake at the point. The Vortex weren't expecting this. They were used to prey that ran or fought in panic. These gladiators moved like soldiers. Jake reached the pack leader first. His sword met the creature's claws in a shower of sparks. The Vortex was fast, but Jake had fought faster opponents. He ducked under a swipe that would have taken his head off and drove his blade into the creature's side. Around him, his team fought with coordination the arena had never seen. Veltar and Sark protected Jake's flanks while Nyx darted between the larger fighters, distracting the Vortex with quick strikes. The crowd was on its feet, shouting in amazement. They had expected to see 20 prisoners torn apart in minutes. Instead, they were watching the most incredible fight in arena history. But the battle was far from over. The Vortex regrouped quickly. They were intelligent hunters, and they adapted to the gladiators' tactics. 2 of the creatures broke away from the main fight and went after Nyx. "Nyx, behind you!" Jake called out. The small Zephyrian spun around just in time to avoid deadly claws. But he was trapped between 2 Vortex with nowhere to run. Jake made a split-second decision. He left his position in the formation and sprinted across the arena. The move was risky because it left the center weak, but he couldn't watch his friend die. Jake tackled one of the Vortex from the side, sending both of them rolling in the sand. The creature's claws raked across his chest, tearing his shirt. Completely open. Jake ignored the pain and managed to pin the Vortex long enough for Nyx to escape, but the damage was done. Jake's shirt hung in tatters, and for the first time since his capture, his dog tags were fully visible to the entire arena. High above, in the Imperial box, Tekanal was watching the fight through electronic binoculars. As Jake rolled away from the Vortex, the metal tags around his neck caught the sunlight and reflected it directly into Tekanal's viewer. Tekanal adjusted the focus and zoomed in on the tags. His blood turned cold as he read the markings stamped into the metal. "General," Tekanal said urgently, grabbing Vakthorn's arm. "Look at this human's identification tags." General Vakthorn took the binoculars and focused on Jake. The human was back on his feet, fighting 2 Vortex at once, but the general wasn't watching the battle anymore. He was reading the clear text on the dog tags. "United States Navy," the general read aloud. "SEAL Team 6. The binoculars trembled in his hands. Every Corvin military officer knew about the border conflicts with Earth. They had studied human military units and capabilities. SEALs were mentioned in every intelligence report as Earth's most dangerous warriors. "How is this possible?" Vakthorn whispered. "The reports said humans were weak. This one has been winning fights for weeks, and we thought he was just a civilian." "Sir," Tekanal said, his voice shaking, "if this is just one Navy SEAL, and he's been hiding among civilians on a transport ship, what does that say about Earth's real military capabilities?" In the arena, Jake and his team were winning. They had killed 8 Vortex and wounded 2 others. The remaining creatures were backing away, their pack instincts telling them this prey was too dangerous. But Jake wasn't thinking about victory. He was focused on keeping his team alive. Blood ran down his chest from the claw marks, but he ignored the pain. Veltar was injured, and Sark was breathing hard. They needed to finish this quickly. "One more push," Jake called out. "Stay together and drive them back." The gladiators advanced as a unit. The surviving Vortex, facing organized resistance they had never encountered before, broke and ran toward the arena walls. The crowd exploded in cheers and amazement. Jake stood in the vague center of the arena, his chest heaving, blood and sand covering his body. His dog tags gleamed in the sunlight for everyone to see. He had no idea that those simple metal tags had just changed everything. In the Imperial box. Emperor Korthfol leaned forward with interest. "Who is this human?" he demanded. General Vac-Thorn was still staring through the binoculars. "Your Majesty, we have made a terrible mistake. This isn't just any human. This is a Navy SEAL, elite special forces from Earth." "What does that mean?" the Emperor asked. Vac-Thorn's face was pale. "It means we've been fighting one of Earth's most dangerous warriors, and we didn't even know it. If they have soldiers like this mixed in with their civilian population, our intelligence about human military strength is completely wrong." Down in the arena, Jake was helping his wounded teammates. He had no idea that his identity had finally been discovered. He was thinking about Lisa and Amy, about the rescue mission he still needed to plan. But around the arena, other alien representatives who had been watching the fight were taking pictures and sending messages to their home governments. Word was already spreading across the galaxy that the Corvan Empire had captured and forced to fight a member of Earth's elite military forces. The political implications were staggering. If Earth learned that one of their special forces soldiers was being used as entertainment, there would be consequences. "Get that human out of the arena immediately," Emperor Korthfol ordered. "I want him brought to the palace for questioning." "Yes, Your Majesty," General Vac-Thorn said. But privately, he was wondering if they had already made an enemy they couldn't afford to have. As guards surrounded Jake and his team, leading them back to the gladiator pits, Jake noticed something different in their behavior. They seemed nervous, almost afraid. He didn't understand why, but something had changed. In his cell that night, Jake touched his dog tags and thought about home. He had no idea that those tags had just told the entire Corvan Empire exactly who they were dealing with. The secret was out. Now the real test would begin. Jake woke up to the sound of heavy boots marching down the corridor. More guards than usual filled the hallway outside his cell. Instead of the regular prison guards, these wore the red armor of the Imperial military. "Martinez," called the captain of the guard unit, "you're coming with us." Jake stood up slowly. Veltar and the other prisoners watched nervously from their cells. Something was very different today. The guards seemed tense, almost afraid. "Where are we going?" Jake asked. "General Vac-Thorn wants to speak with you," the captain said. "Now, move." They led Jake through parts of the building he had never seen before. Instead of the rough stone corridors of the gladiator pits, these hallways had polished floors and proper lighting. They passed through security checkpoints with multiple guards and electronic scanners. Finally, they reached a large room with a table and chairs. The walls were covered with star maps and military displays. General Vac-Thorn sat behind the table, his yellow eyes studying Jake carefully. Tekanol stood beside him with a datapad in his hands. "Sit," the general ordered, pointing to a chair. Across from him, Jake remained standing. "I prefer to stand." General Vac-Thorn's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Very well. Tell me about your military service, human." "I'm not required to give you anything except my name, rank, and service number," Jake replied calmly. "Ah, yes," the general said, leaning back in his chair. "United States Navy, Petty Officer First Class Jake Martinez. Service number. Well, we can read it clearly on your identification tags." Jake's hand moved instinctively to his dog tags. For the first time, he realized they must have figured out what the tags meant. "SEAL Team 6, General Vac-Thorn continued. "Do you know how long we've been searching our databases for information about Earth's special forces?" Jake said nothing, but his mind was racing. If they knew he was a SEAL, everything had changed. They would want information about Earth's military capabilities, about SEAL training and tactics. "We have reports from the border conflicts," Techno said, reading from his datapad. Human forces were described as adequate but not exceptional. Individual warriors were considered weak compared to Corvin soldiers. "But then you arrived," General Vackthorn said, standing up and walking around the table. "One human who fights like 10 ordinary warriors, who thinks and plans like a military commander, who turns a group of broken prisoners into an effective fighting unit." The general stopped directly in front of Jake. "This makes us ask uncomfortable questions. If you are what humans call special forces, how special are you compared to the regular military? And if you were traveling on a civilian transport ship, how many others like you are hidden among the human population?" Jake remained silent, staring straight ahead. "Perhaps you need motivation to talk," General Vackthorn said. He nodded to Techno, who activated a wall screen. The display showed a work camp outside the city. Jake's heart clenched as he saw human prisoners breaking rocks under the hot alien sun. The workers looked thin and exhausted. Guards with energy whips stood watching them. "The other survivors from your transport ship," the general explained, "including a woman named Lisa Carter and her young daughter Amy. They're working 12 hours a day in the mining camps. The child is having trouble keeping up." Jake's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. This was exactly what he had expected. They would threaten innocent people to try to break him. "Here's what will happen," General Vackthorn continued. "You will tell us everything about Earth's military capabilities, training methods, technology, troop numbers, defensive positions. In exchange, we will improve conditions for the human prisoners." "And if I refuse?" Jake asked. "Then conditions will get much worse," the general said simply. "The child especially seems fragile. It would be unfortunate if she didn't survive the work schedule." Jake looked at the screen again. Amy was sitting in the shade, looking pale and weak. Lisa was trying to comfort her while still working. The sight made Jake's chest tight with anger, but his SEAL training had prepared him for this moment. He knew that giving the enemy information would endanger not just his mission, but potentially millions of people back on Earth. "I won't betray my people," Jake said quietly. General Vackthorn studied him for a long moment. "Even to save the lives of these innocent humans?" "Especially to save them," Jake replied. "If I give you information that helps you attack Earth, millions more innocents will die." The general seemed genuinely surprised by this answer. In Corvin culture, personal loyalty was more important than abstract principles. The idea that someone would sacrifice people they cared about for people they had never met was foreign to him. "Interesting," General Vackthorn said. "Your species continues to surprise us." He walked back to his chair and sat down. "Let me tell you what we've learned from studying you, SEAL Martinez. Your fighting techniques show training far beyond anything in our intelligence reports. Your tactical thinking is sophisticated. Your ability to inspire loyalty in other prisoners suggests advanced leadership training." The general leaned forward. "This leads us to a disturbing conclusion. Either you are extraordinary, even among your own people, or our intelligence about human military capabilities is completely wrong." Techno spoke up. "Sir, there's something else. We've been monitoring communications from other alien governments. Word about the human SEAL has spread. Several species are asking questions about Earth's true military strength." Jake tried not to show his satisfaction. If word was spreading, it meant Earth's enemies would be more cautious about attacking. Sometimes the threat of unknown capabilities was more powerful than actual weapons. "You see our problem," General Vackthorn said to Jake. "We built our expansion plans based on the assumption that humans were weak. If that assumption is wrong, we need to recalculate everything. Maybe you should have thought about that before." You started capturing civilian ships, Jake said. The general's eyes flashed with anger. Careful, human. Your value as a source of information is the only thing keeping you alive. Is it? Jake asked. Because from where I sit, it looks like you're more afraid of what I represent than interested in what I know. General Vac-Thorn stood up abruptly. Return him to his cell, he ordered the guards. Double the security around the gladiator pits, and increase the work quotas for the human prisoners. Perhaps hunger will make him more talkative. As the guards led Jake away, he heard Techno speaking quietly to the general. Sir, what if he's right? What if Earth has been deliberately hiding their real military strength? Then we're in more trouble than we thought, the general replied. Back in his cell, Jake found his fellow prisoners waiting anxiously for news. What did they want? Veltar asked. They know what I am, Jake said simply. And they're scared. Scared of one human? Nix asked. Jake touched his dog tags. Not scared of me. Scared of what I represent. They're starting to realize they don't understand. Humans as well as they thought. What does this mean for us? Sark wanted to know. Jake looked around at his friends, these warriors from different worlds who had become his team. It means they're going to push harder. They'll threaten the other human prisoners to try to break me. But it also means they're desperate. And desperate enemies make mistakes, Veltar said, understanding. Exactly, Jake said. They're going to give us opportunities. We just have to be ready to take them. That night, as Jake lay on his sleeping mat, he thought about General Vac-Thorn's questions. The Corvin were right to be worried. Earth's military was much stronger than they realized. And if they pushed too hard, they might find out just how strong. But first, Jake had promises to keep. He had told his fellow prisoners that no one gets left behind. That included Lisa and Amy, and all the other humans suffering in the work camps. The Corvin thought they held all the cards. They were about to learn that sometimes knowing your enemy's weakness is more dangerous than knowing their strength. 3 days after the interrogation, Jake knew the time had come. The guards had doubled around the gladiator pits, but they had also become predictable. Fear made them follow patterns, and patterns could be broken. Tonight, Jake whispered to Veltar during the evening meal. Pass the word to everyone. We move during the shift change at midnight. Veltar nodded and began quietly spreading the message. Over the weeks, Jake had built a network that included prisoners from 12 different species. They all understood the plan. More importantly, they all believed it could work. Jake had learned from Nix that the human work camp was only 5 miles from the arena complex. The little Zephyrian had overheard guards talking about transport schedules. If they could free the arena prisoners and reach the camp quickly, they might save everyone before the Corvin could organize a response. As midnight approached, Jake felt the familiar calm that came before a mission. This was what all his training had prepared him for, not just the physical skills, but the mental discipline to stay focused when everything depended on getting it right. The shift change began exactly on schedule. For 10 minutes, the main corridor would be watched only by cameras. Jake had memorized their positions during his trips to see General Vac-Thorn. Now, Jake said softly, Nix slipped through the ventilation shaft they had loosened over the past week. His small size let him reach the security control room undetected. Within 2 minutes, the camera feeds showed empty corridors, while the screens actually displayed recorded footage from the previous night. Veltar used a lockpick made from stolen metal to open the cell doors. The sound of clicking locks echoed quietly down the corridor as 20 prisoners stepped into freedom. Jake led them through the route he had memorized. They moved in small groups, staying in the camera blind spots. When they reached the armory, Sark and Zack disabled the 2 guards. With silent takedowns Jake had taught them. Weapons for everyone, Jake ordered quietly. But remember, We're not here to fight a war. We're here to rescue people and get out. The prisoners armed themselves with energy rifles and body armor. For the first time in months, they felt like warriors instead of victims. But as they moved toward the exit, alarms began screaming throughout the complex. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Jake's heart sank. Someone had discovered their escape. They know, Veltar said, checking his weapon. Doesn't matter, Jake replied. We stick to the plan. Fast and quiet is over. Now we go fast and loud. They fought their way through 3 checkpoints, using the teamwork Jake had drilled into them. The Corvin guards were tough and well-armed, but they fought as individuals. Jake's team fought as a unit, covering each other and coordinating their attacks. At the main exit, they faced War Chief Grokthul himself, leading a squad of elite guards. The massive Corvin warrior blocked their path with a weapon that glowed with deadly energy. You will not leave this place alive, human, Grokthul snarled. We'll see about that, Jake said. The battle was fierce but brief. Jake's team used every advantage they could find. Nyx crawled through ceiling vents to attack from above. Sark and Veltar flanked the enemy, while Jake charged straight down the middle. When the smoke cleared, Grokthul lay unconscious, and his guards were defeated. The way to the outside was clear. Transport vehicles, Jake ordered, pointing to a row of Corvin military speeders. Everyone who can drive, take a vehicle. We're going to need speed. They raced through the alien city streets as more alarms joined. The chorus behind them. Jake drove the lead speeder with Veltar beside him, following directions Nyx had memorized from overheard conversations. The work camp sat in a valley, surrounded by mining equipment and guard towers. Spotlights swept the area where human prisoners were housed in long, low buildings. Jake could see guards rushing to defensive positions as news of the arena breakout reached them. They're expecting us, Veltar observed. Good, Jake said grimly. Let's not disappoint them. Jake's team hit the camp from 3 directions simultaneously. While most of the freed gladiators engaged the guard towers, Jake led a small group straight to the prisoner barracks. He kicked open the first door and found dozens of humans huddled together in fear. They were thin and exhausted, but alive. Jake Martinez, United States Navy, he announced. We're here to get you out. A woman near the back of the group stood up slowly. It was Lisa Carter, thinner than before, but still strong. Behind her, Amy peered out with wide eyes. Jake? Amy said in a small voice. You came back for us. I promised I would, Jake said, kneeling down to the little girl's level. Are you ready to go home? The rescue took precious minutes as Jake's team freed prisoners from 6 different buildings. More than 200 humans had survived the work camps, though many needed help walking, but time was running out. In the distance, Jake could see lights approaching fast. Corvin military reinforcements were coming, and they would arrive with overwhelming force. We can't outrun them with all these people, Veltar said, pointing to the approaching lights. Jake looked at the freed humans, then at his alien friends who had risked everything to help him. An idea formed in his mind, desperate but possible. Get everyone to the main mining area, he ordered. The open pit with all the heavy equipment. Jake, what are you thinking? Lisa asked. The Corvin think in terms of honor and individual combat, Jake explained as they moved. But they've never faced someone who thinks like a SEAL. At the mining site, Jake positioned the humans and freed gladiators among the massive earth-moving machines. When the Corvin reinforcements arrived, led by General Vakthorn himself, they found themselves facing an impossible situation. Surrender now, the general's voice boomed from his command vehicle, and we will show mercy. Jake stepped into the open, his hands empty, but his voice carrying clearly across the valley. I have a counter-offer, General. Let all these people go, and maybe we won't tell the galaxy how badly you underestimated Earth. You are in no position to make demands, human. Really? Jake asked. Because I count about 50 different news drones from other alien governments watching this whole thing. Word is already spreading that the mighty Corvin Empire can't handle one Navy SEAL and his friends. General Vackthorn hesitated. Jake was right. The political implications of this situation were enormous. Other species were watching to see how the Corvin handled the crisis. That hesitation cost him the initiative. A new sound filled the air, the roar of spacecraft engines approaching. Fast. Jake looked up and smiled as familiar shapes descended from the sky. 3 Earth Alliance cruisers dropped out of hyperspace, led by the flagship Enterprise. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice came over every communication channel in the area. This is Admiral Sullivan of the Earth Alliance Navy. We're here for our people. Jake had never been happier to hear an American accent in his life. The standoff was over. Faced with an Earth fleet and the watching eyes of the galaxy, General Vackthorn had no choice but to negotiate. Within hours, all the human prisoners were aboard the Earth ships. Jake stood on the bridge of the Enterprise, finally out of his torn gladiator clothes and back in a proper uniform. One Navy SEAL caused all this trouble? Admiral Sullivan asked with a slight smile. One Navy SEAL and a lot of good friends, Jake corrected, looking through the viewport at the alien prisoners, who had chosen to come with them rather than stay under Corvin rule. As the Earth fleet prepared to leave Corvin space, Jake touched his dog tags one more time. Those simple pieces of metal had changed everything, not because of what was written on them, but because of what they represented. The Corvin Empire learned that day that strength isn't just about individual power. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can face is someone who refuses to abandon their principles. No matter the cost. And across the galaxy, other species learned something else. Humanity had not been hiding because they were weak. They had been showing restraint because they were strong. Jake Martinez went home a hero, but he knew the real victory belonged to everyone who had fought beside him. In the end, that was what being human meant. Not fighting alone for personal glory, but standing together when it mattered most. No one gets left behind. It wasn't just a motto. It was a promise. And Jake had kept his word.